Oh, how we love books. There are so many, right? We love banned books. We love the Book of Life, Book of the Dead, Book of Job, Book of Spells, Book of Stamps. Remember those? The Good Book, the Blue Book, and any number of books of fiction and nonfiction. And yet, have you ever heard of one titled The Book of A? I didn't think so. I made that one up. Author Salman Rushdie said, a book is a version of the world. If you do not like it, ignore it, or offer your own version in return. So if I were to create my own, it would be titled The Book of A. It would mostly address these two concepts, agnosticism and atheism. Now, for purposes of a working definition, an atheist might claim there is no deity, transcendent or personal God. Listen closely. An agnostic might say there is no knowledge to support the existence of God. Consider this. Throughout history, there have been individuals in the arts and sciences who cherished their belief in God. They include Hildegard of Bingen, Isaac Newton, Unitarian Joseph Priestley, inventor of oxygen, Kathleen Lonsdale, the first woman president of the British Association of the Advancement of Science. Also existing throughout the ages, there were people who did not affirm the existence of God, including scientists. Many of you know this, Stephen Hawking, Albert Einstein, and DNA researcher Rosalind Franklin. Additionally, there have been Jewish persons who embrace the idea of a mystery that is suspected but still unknown. They include the philosopher Baruch Spinoza, who said, within every living being, from the amoeba to the person, exists an impulse called conatus. That is, quote, the desire within each living being that strives to persevere in its being. And I will even add that it might be what is within us all that wants to be better than the present condition. Others on the list include author Betty Friedman, who wrote The Feminine Mystique, and the American astronomer or stargazer Carl Sagan. And I have got to stop here and talk about Carl Sagan. He attended our UU congregation in Ithaca, New York, whose celebration of life was held there when he died. Carl Sagan said, some people think God is an outsized, light-skinned male with a long white beard, sitting on a throne somewhere up there in the sky, busily tallying the fall of every sparrow. Others, for example, Spinoza and Einstein, considered God to be essentially the sum total of all the physical laws which describe the universe. I do not know of any compelling evidence for anthropomorphic patriarchs controlling human destiny from some hidden celestial vantage point, but it would be madness to deny the existence of physical laws. He also wrote, spirit comes from the Latin word to breathe. What we breathe is air, which is certainly matter, however thin, said Sagan. Despite usage to the contrary, there is no necessary implication in the word spiritual that we are talking of anything other than matter, including the matter of which the brain is made, or anything outside the realm of science. On occasion, I will feel free to use the word spirit. Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality. When we recognize our place in an immensity of light years and the passage of ages, when we grasp the intricacy, beauty, and subtlety of life, then that soaring feeling, that sense of elation and humility combined is surely spiritual. I adore the research and writings of Carl Sagan, and yet some would cringe at his words. I'm speaking today of the diversiveness of thought and belief within humanity, much of humanity is sitting among us today, right? And yet, contained herein, this beautiful, broad expansion or field of diversity, even in this room, people of one understanding will unabashedly express dislike of persons who hold a differing perspective. It breaks my heart. Through the years, I've been appalled at how naturally people will snub their noses at other individuals. So this fact reminds me of a source, a story from the secular archives. Maybe many of you remember Dr. Seuss. Published in 1953, it was titled The Sneetches. Do any of you remember this book? Yeah, when I say the Sneetches, don't you get the pictures of the images with the little star bellies? His characters were yellow, rounded belly beings who walked on two legs and lived on a beach. Some of the characters had a green star on their bellies and others did not. Here's an excerpt from the Seuss saga. Now, the star-belly Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain-belly Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big. They were really so small, you might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-belly Sneetches would brag, "We're the best kind of Sneetch on the beaches." With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. "We'll have nothing to do with the plain-belly sort." And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. As the story progresses, one watches as prejudice is embraced in a community of quirky characters. A tricky monkey shyster from another town enters mid-story and creates total havoc. And yet there's a happy ending here. So here's a final excerpt. The Sneetches got really quite smart on that day, the day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. That day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars and whether they had one or not upon theirs. The story about mythical Sneetches is quite poignant. I mean, it points out that one being is not better than another being. So you might ask, why bring up that old tale in a discussion about agnosticism, atheism, or theism, or angels? Because quite frankly, I'm weary of the many wasted words expressed by people arguing over who is more correct, one who is a theist or a person who believes in God, especially a personal one and one who does not. I believe the truth is subjective and that no person can ultimately define the truth for another. I know this is hard to hear. For many of us who grew up, it's okay to hang on to that strong faith in God. It's okay to hang on to your close association to Jesus, a man who stepped outside of social circles and was a model for all of us for issues of social justice. Hang on to that. A former Catholic, but one who still loves the sensual aspects of rituals, Chet Ramo wrote a book titled "When God is Gone, Everything is Holy: The Making of a Religious Naturalist." In his easy-to-read thesis, he points out that there are two types of people. He said, one, those who look to authority of the past, and two, those who put hope in the future. I wonder, can there be a third category where we have a memory and look to the past, people who lived, who walked the earth like we do? Some of their prophecies and understandings can influence our lives, and we can also live of our lives as though we want to make a difference and the future should change. In the first category, explains Ramos, are persons who give their conceptual allegiance to ancestors, holy books, tradition, venerable prophets, elders, shamans, and gurus. We need them. He goes on to explain that in the second category are the children of the scientific revolution, the spiritual descendants of Francis Bacon and Galileo. What's at stake, he claims, is this: who among us isn't depressed by the sectarian madness that seems to engulf the world, the fury of antagonisms between people of different religions and cultures. There is nothing new in any of this. Thus it has always been. Is there any chance that we might rid ourselves of the irrational fear of the other? Let me just repeat that. Is there any chance that we might rid ourselves of the irrational fear or dislike of the other? Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. All of us work very hard because as Unitarian Universalists, we support each person's responsible search for meaning. So when we're around other people and we have conversations, instead of saying, do you believe in God? I don't. Do you believe? You say, tell me about your faith understanding. I would love to learn more about you. My dear listeners, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, yes, we can rid ourselves of the suffering we cause one another. I believe it is possible for a Christian, a Muslim, or Jewish individual to abstain from belittling an atheist or an agnostic. And conversely speaking, that an atheist can refrain from mocking one who cherishes an appreciation for Western religious traditions that involve the love of a personal God. So sincerely now, how do we do this? First, let us affirm that faith involves the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. People in the path have said, oh, Unitarian Universalists, they can believe anything, and that is simply not true. What I believe has been thoroughly researched on my part for what feeds me and nurtures me. And I believe that too is part of how we adopt a faith understanding, is that which is helpful. As a human person, what is helpful to me? My mother one time said, is there a heaven? And I said, I don't know, Mom. I don't know. And she says, well, I want there to be because I need to see my mother again. I'm not going to put anybody down for a belief in whatever is helpful. We say this free and responsible search for truth and meaning because we believe one should not be shamed or coerced into a personal understanding. We say responsible because we believe that one's truth is a highly personal journey to be seriously considered. For example, what I have come to understand as truth for me may not be truth for you. May we respect this difference. Let's recognize the common concerns we all share about being human, shall we? Every person will at some point or other will address the following questions, no doubt. Who am I? Who are you? What do I think about the mystery of all that can't be explained? Finally, how are all of us to relate with one another, especially with the hovering reality of the inescapable fact of life, that is death? Consider these two encounters. One morning, a person entered my office. I've been in ministry 16 years, so it's not this past year, it's some time in the past. One morning, a person entered my office, sat down, and said, tell me now, what can you say that will help me with the despair I feel about knowing that there's nothing else out there, that I am on my own, that God does not exist, and all I have is only the here and now? I mean, how does a person live when this is all there is, and why should I even bother? Two days later, a different person entered my office, sat down, and said, please help me. I know that God is good, but I cannot understand why God would take away my wife. We were back from our honeymoon for only 1 week when she was diagnosed with cancer, and she died within 3 months. Why would a loving God do such a thing? These two individuals were Unitarian Universalists. For both persons who visited with me that week, my answer was similar. I said, a why will likely never be accounted for. But the how to survive and thrive is something we can explore. For example, you are not alone on life's journey. Others are presently here to support you and to share with you what has been helpful for them. And prophetic words of people who have lived before us are also helpful. Our human experience is universal, and that experience that is human also means that you are here for a purpose. I think living with why and how is extremely difficult, don't you? Our role as responsible human beings is to do the best we can when trying to discern the meaning of our experiences. People will form their own perceptions. For example, Chet Ramo told this story about English naturalist and biologist Charles Darwin. He wrote, "He too faced afflictions without support of a belief in loving God or an afterlife, most particularly the death of his darling daughter Annie at age 10, apparently of tuberculosis. With Annie's death, the great biologist at last put the notion of a personal divinity behind him. He too had completed the circle of Pascal. He was one of those great minds that have investigated all knowledge and accumulated by man, only to discover at the end that, in fact, they know nothing. And yet," Ramo wrote of Darwin, "even his grievous bereavement, the man continued to see the face of nature bright with gladness." Ramo said Darwin was deeply conscious of the mystery and power of existence. Darwin, the Unitarian agnostic, came to the conclusion that when it comes to belief, each person will arrive at a personal conclusion. For example, in a letter to American biologist Asa Gray, Darwin wrote, "I'm inclined to look at everything as resulting from designed laws, with the details, whether good or bad, left to the working out of what we may call chance. Not that this notion at all satisfies me. I feel most deeply that the whole subject is too profound for the human intellect." I love this. I'm okay that though I may find myself an intellectual, I still know nothing. I'm okay with that. I like living in the mystery. Though I might stomp my feet and want to know the answers why bad things happen, I'm okay with human humility. "A dog might as well speculate on the mind of Newton," said Darwin. "Let each man or woman hope and believe what they can." In more inclusive language, I say let each person believe what they can. On the one hand, I invite people who think they alone have special privilege due to adherence of the idea of divine favor to break the cycle of intimidating dominance over others, or that the disdain for others who don't believe as they do might subside. I have to tell you, one of the most difficult parts of being a Unitarian Universalist minister is the interfaith activities. It's lovely. I love to participate, but I have to tell you, when I come home from an interfaith event, I'm exhausted and I need complete silence for about 2 hours, because so often I'm asked, "I've never heard of Unitarian Universalists. Tell us about Unitarian. Do they believe in God?" I said, "Some do, some don't. All of us believe in acceptance and nurturance on the growth that is on a journey that is spiritual." And you know what happens? Conversation stops right there. And often I don't even get a repeated look in the eye after that. I'm telling you this because I will still participate in interfaith events. I will still sit at holiday dinners where conservative members of my family, conservative Christians, will say things to make me feel bad. But I'm not going to stop, because I still believe in the power of diversity and the fact that every person has a right to believe as they desire. I invite people who think they alone have special privilege due to the adherence of the idea of a divine favor to break this cycle of intimidating dominance over others, or that the disdain for others who don't believe as they do might subside. In other words, theists need to behave like angels, loving angels, and stop demeaning those who do not adhere to a concept of a God, but who live their lives for no other reason than being good. Not for God, but for goodness sake. Some behave for God, and that's good for them. But each person should be able to behave in a manner that is respectful and shows hope for a future in the here and now that is loving and just. In my book of A, these angels are not mythical, they're real. I believe in angels who walk the earth amongst us, unaware of how wonderful they are. On the other hand, I'm also asking individuals who do not believe in a personal God, who may identify as atheists or agnostic, to forego the notion that they are esteemed, have a higher intellect, or have superiority of thought over another person. Essentially, I'm asking people to stop being elitist arses and affirm the personal understanding of others, even when these others cherish a love for God, and yes, ancient tales of miracles and more. Arses do not belong in my book of A. It is I know they don't belong in yours either. And our prayer constantly is for patience, right? Patience. It is my hope that humans around the world will have more awareness and non-judgmental appreciation of the spiritual needs of one another. Might Mary Oliver's approach to prayer become our shared mantra? In her poem titled One Summer Day, she wrote, "I don't exactly know what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention." Pay attention. The world does not need one more person who suffers because of cherished beliefs. Let's lean a little, learn a little from Chet Ramo, who said, "The point of religion, I now believe, is to celebrate the unfathomable mystery of creation." All that being said, we also know there's a rise of white Christian nationalism that needs our attention, and in the individuals who behave in ways that would not have been affirmed by Jesus, I have to pause and say, may we have patience and continue the hard work of showing that all people deserve respect and no one needs to be coerced or condemned for what they believe. May it be so. Amen.